So we saw that last month you were part of a discussion on the topic modern Albania, from dictatorship to democracy. What do you think were the most important milestones that shaped this transition from a dictatorship to a democracy?
Well, thank you very much for mentioning this. I was part of a discussion in promoting this wonderfully written book by my good friend Fred Abrahams here in Berlin. And it's a nice and relatively accurate snapshot of the process that moved Albania from dictatorship to democracy. It's a by and large, very long and complex process. Albania, as you might know, was the last country out of the Eastern European countries to step out of the democracy, of a dictatorship and pass towards the democratic regime. The dictatorship in Albania was tougher, definitely, compared to the dictatorships in other Central and Eastern European countries, and that's probably what dictated a more complex and prolonged transition phase for Albania. I don't think I will be ever be able to pay enough tribute to my people, in particular to the young generation of the early 90s, who were able to stand up against dictatorship and make the difference. Their slogan being, "We want Albania to become like the rest of Europe." From there, on international terms, I have been lucky and privileged to be part and parcel of very important milestones of the journey of Albania. I was there as part of our delegation when Albania became a member of the Council of Europe. I was also there when Albania signed the first institutional agreement with the European Community of the time, a trade and cooperation agreement. I was part of the Albanian team that negotiated the Stabilization and Association Agreement in 2005-2007. Last but not least, I was fortunate to be a witness of the flag hoisting for Albania when we became members of North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 2009. It has been, as I told you, a rather prolonged and complex process, but the important thing is that it is moving in the right direction.
So there were many milestones for you.
Indeed, yes.
And Albania has clearly made a lot of changes in the recent history and is now currently an official candidate for the membership of the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
What further steps do you think that are the most important to ensure that accession is granted?
We are very much aware that becoming a member of the European Union is a difficult task. It's a task that demands lots of reforms. Reforms are not always sweet and nice. Sometimes they are bitter and difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But we are fully convinced that we need those reforms, not simply to make the country a member of the European Union, but to make the country a better place, to make our democracy a more vivid and functional democracy, and to guarantee a higher standard of living for our people. It creates synergy with the efforts of bringing the country closer to the European Union. And we are now a candidate country, and our next step and next ambition is to get a date and start negotiations for membership in the European Union. Again, a process that will be neither short nor easy. It takes lots of efforts and first of all, homework that needs to be completed internally and then be presented to the European Union. We are very closely working with the European Commission. The European Commission has identified 5 key priorities in which we need to progress before the Commission takes a decision to recommend to the member nations the start of the negotiations. I'm optimistic that we will be able within this year to get a positive recommendation by the European Commission, and then it's up to the member countries to consider the recommendation of the European Commission and authorize the Commission to start negotiations with Albania. So by and large, as I told you, I have the feeling that the country is moving in the right direction, although not in a very rosy environment. The region is experiencing difficulties, first of all because of the economic crisis and financial difficulties that have engulfed most of the surrounding nations, even those who are members of the European Union. Secondly, the refugee crisis is also affecting a lot the region. But nevertheless, if one takes a moving picture of where the region stands now and where it was even 5 years ago, you can see a hugely important difference. And the region as a whole is also moving in the right direction. Here, I wouldn't be fair if I did not mention the irreplaceable role that the Federal Republic of Germany has played in this regard. It was at the invitation of Chancellor Merkel that the prime ministers of the Western Balkans convened here in 2014, and they gave start to what is by now known as the Berlin process, a process which not only strengthens the complex of the relations between the region and the EU, but also contributes in strengthening relations between or amongst the nations of the Western Balkans as well. A second conference took place last year in Vienna, which brought the process, started in Berlin, one step forward. And we are looking forward to the next stage, which is the same conference taking place in Paris in July this year. So not only internal tasks need to be fulfilled, but also regional cooperation is a irreplaceable criteria that we need to contribute in order to bring not simply our country but the whole region towards the European Union.
Mm-hmm. And which are the 5 keys that have been given by the European Commission?
Those 5 key priorities include solid administration, fight against organized crime, the justice reform in Albania, fight against corruption, and yeah.
And during your political career, you have been appointed as head of mission of the European Union and to NATO, and also as an ambassador to Belgium. Such high political positions bring also many difficult situations. When and which decision in your political career was one of the most difficult?
Difficult to say. Every post comes with its own difficulties. The more difficult it is, the more professional pleasure it gives you in the end of the day. But I would say 1997 was probably the most difficult part of my political career. The country was in turmoil. I was accredited to the European Union at that time, and I had to represent the country in a very difficult period of its history. Trying hard to get the support of the European community of that time. So I think that would be the most difficult part of my diplomatic career.
And what have you learned through that year, 1997?
I think this is a rather interdependent and complex world. One thing that affects a nation definitely has an impact on other nations as well. And it becomes an imperative to strive so that you get the maximum of support from the rest of the nations around. But apart from this, I would like to mention another important period, and that's the Kosovo crisis. I was ambassador to NATO at that time, and I had to coordinate from the NATO angle the handling of the refugees in Albania. NATO was quite active, not simply on military terms, but also on humanitarian grounds. They are building up camps in order to care for the arriving refugees from Kosovo. So that was again a difficult but fascinating period of my diplomatic career.
And then how do you look to like the refugee crisis right now, which is like facing Europe and Germany as well?
I would comment from the very modest position of a country that has not been directly affected by this crisis, in the sense that we have had no massive arrival of refugees in our own territory. But nevertheless, we are following the events with tremendous attention. And we have expressed our readiness to be part and parcel of any European Union plan that aims at handling this situation insofar as our part of the world is concerned. If I take a step back and comment a little bit in general about the situation, is one of those crises that threaten the very foundations of European institutions, the way we have known them so far. We have taken for granted things like Schengen, for example. People can move freely from one EU nations to another. The free movement of capitals, the free movement of merchandise and goods as well. Now, this refugee crisis has affected the Schengen rules, as we have all seen. And therefore it needs tremendous care. I think the last two summits of the European Union have been taking steps in the very right direction, but I remain of the opinion also that the sustained and long-term solution is in the region. That is to say, a political settlement in Syria that will contribute for people to stay put where they are rather than headed towards Europe.
And with regard to cultural diplomacy as a tool to achieve conflict resolution and peace, can you give us an example of a time during which you were involved in a successful cultural dialogue?
I could think of a lot of events, but I remain of the opinion that communication and building bridges of communication in general, including human contacts, including cultural exchanges, are the best way to make people and nations understand that throughout their history they have created a lot of prejudices against each other. So if you look at the cultural dimension in the Western Balkans, you cannot but note that there are so many similarities. They more or less share the same admiration for culture, the same appreciation for creations of artistic nature, and therefore putting culture as a element of promoting relations between countries is of utmost importance. Here in Germany, we are trying modestly to do whatever we can in order to promote the Albanian culture. I can tell you that in a couple of weeks we will be organizing a photo exhibition trying to show photography in Albania as it existed in the early years of the 20th century. But there is much more that we can do as well.
And can you maybe give like examples of cultural dialogue that you had besides like with Germany?
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be that would be difficult since I have mostly done EU and NATO in my political career. But if you want to, I could refer to cultural exchanges between Albania and Serbia, between Kosovo and Serbia, whereby history has brought those nations in severe conflict throughout the time.
Mm-hmm.
And by promoting culture, you bring people together. And by bringing people together, you dilute misunderstanding and prejudices that people might have had
Mm-hmm.
due to one reason or another.
French and German youth office. We have studied cooperation.
Yeah, that's a very good remark. I told you about the Berlin process and preparations that we are making for the Paris conference. One of the deliverables that was identified in the conference of Berlin and further on in Vienna last year was we need to strengthen cooperation between youth. And we had the opportunity to refer to the German-French youth cooperation. I'm of the opinion that in this world you need to be creative, but sometimes you don't need to be creative because things have already been created and you simply need to take their example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think not simply Albania, but all the countries of the region picked up on this French-German youth cooperation, which was a very good means that provided for youth exchanges, and culture definitely comes with it. And that helps shaping up the future, building up a generation that gets rid of the old cliches and prejudices and is able to look forward to the future within a general European context.
And the next question is, you already answered with one example, but how is the Embassy of Albania promoting Albanian culture in Germany?
We have had some very good events in the land of North Rhine-Westphalia. Events that involved making known Albania, its tradition, its customs, and not only, but also the new input that Albania is able to bring to the European culture, in particular in the German framework. I think we are lucky and fortunate to have very distinguished representative of the Albanian culture here in Germany, and I would simply suffice myself to mention one name, Ervis Gega. You can look and find out in the webpage of the embassy. She is a very gifted violinist. She plays throughout Germany, and she has helped to make a good contribution for Albania as well. We also were part and parcel of promotion of another renowned Albanian artist, Sajmir Pirgu, who is a singer, a tenor, and he was here in Berlin to promote his last creation compact disc, and he will again be here in May with another performance.
And how do you want to make it better in the future?
I could also refer to Andri Sala, who is an Albanian renowned artist who resides here in Berlin, and he also promotes art and culture. He has also contributed to make Albania better known culturally speaking in this country.
And how do you want to make it better, the promotion of the Albanian culture?
I think one can never say that he or she has done enough. There is plenty of room that we can improve. We are a small nation in this world. You compete diplomatically for many things, but most of anything you compete for attention. And promoting culture is something that brings attention to your country. I think through negotiations we concluded, signed, and are in the process of ratification of a cultural agreement between Republic of Albania and Federal Republic of Germany. That's a good legal framework that provides for both countries to come closer culturally with each other, and would create a better perspective, in particular for Albania, a small nation with limited resources, to promote its culture in the Federal Republic of Germany.
And Albania has a strong relationship with Germany. Since November 2015, you have a new cultural agreement which supports cooperation between universities and promotes scholarships and exchange programs. In what way do you think education can be used as a tool to strengthen your relationship further?
I think I referred to the agreement mostly on cultural ground, but it has definitely a very important educational agreement. I have always been and remain of the opinion that the best investment we can make is in the minds of the people, and education comes with that. I would be interested to see as many students coming from Albania to this country to study. I would be interested to see as many educational exchanges between both countries. I can tell you that as the agreement is coming into force, I see an increase in the domain of relations between educational institutions. Last week we had a very good visit of a team from the Hamburg University in Albania. They are trying to scan a little bit the horizon and see what the present situation is in Albania with regard to professional education, and how can we together with Germany improve cooperation on those grounds.
That was the last question. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your time and the interview. We will type the interview and I will send an email to Mrs. Irida.
Thank you. We will review that and send you the final version of the interview.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Have a nice day.
I truly appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.